Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to, of course, another album of the week. This, of course, is episode number 91. So, since, of course, Sodom are going to be releasing their 16th studio album titled Genesis XIX this Friday, I, of course, decided to spotlight a Sodom album. And the album I am spotlighting here this week is actually considered not one of their most best records. Again, you would expect me to cover, like, for example, maybe Obsessed by Cruelty, Persecution Mania, Agent Orange, Code Red, M16. You expect me to at least spotlight those albums, but not this particular album. Especially also albums like either Get What You Deserve or Masquerade in Blood, for example. But still, you would not expect me to spotlight this album due to how panned this album can be, because depending on who you ask, it's either considered, at least an enjoyable record, or you also will, whoever you ask, they'll either also will say, well, this is their most worst or their most boring record, depending. But when it comes to this album, I've got a little bit of soft spot. Of course, you should know already, it's Better Off Dead, which actually was released on October 5th of 1990. Therefore, since we have already passed October 5th, it's already hit its 30th anniversary. Still, though, this, of course, was their fourth full-length album, and it definitely followed up to, of course, their it still is, to a lot of people, considered one of their very best records, or their very best to begin with. That, of course, was Agent Orange, which, again, it's a classic thrash metal album, along with Persecution Mania, or that. Also, I'm also forgetting about Tapping the Vein, which is also another loved record to begin with, too, which that album followed up, of course, Better Off Dead. But again, I'm not spotlighting any of those albums. It's Better Off Dead. I definitely wanted to kind of take another look at this one. I wanted to revisit this one, which again, when I first heard this record, I thought it wasn't that bad of an album. I should also definitely point out this was actually the very first album for, of course, guitar player Michael Hoffman. And it's the only album with him on guitar, because after this he was replaced by Andy Briggs. And that lasted for at least 2 albums, which of course being Tapping the Vein and Get What You Deserve. So, this is the only album, again, him replacing Frank Blackfire, who has been back in the band since 2018, and of course the new album Genesis XIX definitely serves to probably the first full-length album Frank Blackfire has, of course, been playing on since 1989's classic record Agent Orange. So, but here on Better Off Dead, this is the first album without Frank Blackfire, and it's again being replaced by Michael Hoffman, which you can tell, while definitely Michael Hoffman is more of a different guitar player compared to, of course, Frank Blackfire. I mean, he still delivers some thrashy riffs, but he's definitely a more, I guess you can say, almost a more classic metal kind of guitar player. Definitely, which will definitely show up on a few songs. So before I really get into any of the songs in general, let's do a track listing rundown. I definitely want to do this for sure. Which again, we got about 12 songs, though there's actually 10 songs actually on the vinyl, because of what's taken off is their cover of Thin Lizzy's Cold Sweat and Tarred and Feathered. Usually it was just 10 songs, but here on the CD copy there's at least 12 songs, and it all clocks in at 49 minutes and 10 seconds. But so these 12 songs, of course, are An Eye for an Eye, Shellfire Defense, The Saw is the Law, Turn Your Head Around, which of course is a Tank cover, which is their second and last Tank cover. Actually, their first Tank cover was Don't Walk Away, which was actually a CD only or at times I think a cassette only bonus track for of course Agent Orange. But Turn Your Head Around is their second and last Tank cover, which definitely shows their influence and where they in terms of the classic metal influences and so on. So though that is there. So track number 5, of course, Captured the Flag. Then of course track number 6 being Cold Sweat, their Thin Lizzy cover. Then Blood Trails, Never Healing Wound, Better Off Dead, which is the title track. Resurrection, Tarred and Feathered, and Stalingrad. I might have butchered that very last track, though it's very much similar to something like Osabong, or fuck, I think I already was, yeah, Osabombt. Oscabombed. Yeah, there we go. I finally, I think I corrected there, which again, it's in that similar vein. But there you go. There's your 12 songs here. So when it comes to the songs itself, I don't know. I think that there's still, I've got a soft spot for this album. I think there's definitely still some pretty enjoyable thrash metal songs in here, though at the same time this was definitely more of an easier kind of album. I think for those, again, since at this period of time, a lot of the beginning in the 1990s, a lot of the thrash metal bands were starting to really kind of go in a more commercial direction in some ways. And I think this was like Sodom's attempt, because again, a year later, Metallica does the Black Album, and then in 1992, Megadeth does Countdown to Extinction, and I think in many ways, and of course Anthrax, the Persistence of Time. So Sodom, I think in many ways, kind of did a record that I think you can almost put in that same category. But if you were to personally ask me, I think I'll take Better Off Dead over the Black Album. I'll take this over, for sure I'll take this over Countdown to Extinction, and I'll take this over Euthanasia. I know that might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but that's the way I am, because I mean, I'll take the Saw's Law over Sympathy of Destruction and Enter Sandman any day of the week. I'll say I'll take it over any day of the week. The Saw's Law is a fucking classic song too. Actually, that's probably one of my personal favorite Sodom songs. It's just a heavy song, and I'll definitely get to its lyrical ideas. Actually, again, there's at least some literature, so I guess we're gonna just go on to there. There is at least the two songs in this album that are inspired by fictional literature would be An Eye for an Eye and The Saw's Law. The Saw's Law, of course, it's an easy one. It's about Leatherface, because of course the title is actually taken, even though it's kind of a play on the Saws, the family that was kind of seen on the chainsaw in like Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. But still, it fits. The Saw's Law, you know who it's about, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. And again, it's just a more of a I don't know, mid-tempo, just straight up heavy track, almost like an Accept style metal song, like again, like Balls to the Wall or something. It's like kind of that kind of vein, that same pacing, but it's a heavy song, and it's definitely, again, crunchy and heavy, just a good one. But the other song that I think is definitely based around fictional literature is the opening song, An Eye for an Eye. I thought for years, every time I've listened to the opening, the intro of it, I knew where I heard that intro from. I knew where it was from, and given the song, I knew it was about a particular comic book character. Finally, when you look on Wikipedia, it finally at least that got answered. I finally now, because I knew where that intro was taken from. It was, of course, taken from, of course, the opening. I believe it is because it's been a long time since I've seen the film, but the 1989 Dolph Lundgren film of The Punisher. That's where that whole intro bit is taken from, and that's why I think the song itself has definitely had to at least been inspired by the Punisher comic books, because it just has that again with its lyrical content and so on. and it just works. And I wish this would have been used for a Punisher film to begin with. I would have preferred if it was used for Warzone. I would prefer this over either the Slipknot or Slayer song that was used in the film. I would have preferred if they had used An Eye for an Eye. I think it would have worked a lot more better than what they've used in like Warzone, all the modern fucking rock. This would have been a much better song. But I think it's a good fucking opener. It's a real fast, thrashy. Again, very, very much typical German thrash and typical of Sodom. But it's such a catchy, such a hooky thrash song for what it is. And I just love it. It's just infectious. It's a great opener and does great. So, and definitely I would say the Saw is the Law and An Eye for an Eye are definitely my two of my favorite songs off this album, along with songs like Shellfire Defense, Blood Trails, and the title track, and even of course Resurrection I also dig, which Resurrection, again, being one of the more of a mid-paced song, but it's still, again, very much, I would say more closer to typical German traditional metal, like, again, something like Accept, and at times something like, in that kind of vein, for sure. I would say it definitely falls in that sort of level of German traditional metal, or Udio. It's in that, it's just in that vein. I think they're definitely good songs. So I think that there just really isn't really a terrible song on this album. As far as the cover songs on here, again, when it comes to Sodom covering Tank, it really does show a lot of their influences when it comes to new wave or British heavy metal. And since covering Tank, you can tell that it fits like a glove because of Tom Angel Ripper's vocals. He really, at times, when he does Tank songs, he really does end up really sounding a lot at times like Algie Ward of Tank. He really does sound, he's got that gravelly voice to him. And I think it would have been very cool if Sodom had did a new wave or British heavy metal style covers album, because they do a good job of covering stuff like that. I would love to also hear them cover stuff like as well Vardis at times, or I would love to hear them do like maybe Tigers of Pantang as well, though I don't know if I want them to do Gangland, because Crater's already done a version of Gangland already. I think they would have. I think when it comes to any new wave British heavy metal track, I think Sodom would do a great job to it, because again, when you listen to some of these albums and listen to, of course, just the musical style, like they pretty much are like a more thrashed up Tank / Motorhead. Just in that sort of vein. They just have that very almost punky but very rockin' kind of edge to it. But again, it's just again with the sort of thrashy attitude of like of a lot of the thrash metal bands. It just is really heavied and thrashed up and so on. So I think it definitely fits like a glove, and I think they do this again. They do a good job doing the Tank covers. So it's going. And the same goes for their cover of Cold Sweat from Thin Lizzy. I think, though, of course, I do prefer this, Sodom's version over Megadeth's version on Super Collider. Ugh. There's a album I don't want to keep dropping all the time in any of these videos. Still, though, I think Sodom does a good version of Cold Sweat, yet it may at times stay close to the version from Thin Lizzy, but at the same time, instead of Phil Lynnett's vocals, it's with, of course, Tom Angel Ripper's very gravelly, just very distinctive, a Razor-style vocal style. Just his very guttural. Again, almost like Lemmy. He just has that kind of real snarl to his voice. Then I think, again, it's what kind of adds into, of course, their version of Cold Sweat. But it's a good rockin' version. So, again, Sodom, I think, nails pretty... When it comes to covers, Sodom really does a pretty good job of covering some of these classic metal songs. That's why I'm still surprised they haven't done a full-on covers album, because they do a good job of doing justice to some of these songs. I'm like... I guess in some ways you really can put them in the same sort of category at times with either when Metallica would cover songs in the past, and of course then for sure even here and there Judas Priest. I would say Sodom are in that kind of a direction. They definitely tend to do some pretty good covers. in my opinion. So I think that they do good job, especially covering. Though you also can say it's probably unnecessary, but again, they just do a good job covering it, and it definitely, again, it gives a listener's inside, it gives the listener a inside look into their influence and where the cloth was cut from when it comes to the musical stylings for Sodom. Again, whenever times, it's always cool when bands do it because it gives you a really good look to where their influences came from and what made them want to, really just write music in general and why they wanted to play the stuff they wanted to play to begin with. So it's a good look into that, and I think Sodom does a good job with some of these. So I just can't say anything bad with some of the songs on here. I also now I do want to also address the Saw Is the Law single. We got some voice issues here. Alright, so I want to address the Saw Is the Law the CD single, because there's actually an exclusive version of the Saw Is the Law on there. Basically, it's a more longer version, though I think might be slightly different recorded too. Because I've listened to both versions of the Saw Is the Law on the album and the single. I think there's some even not just the fact that they're using for sure adding in some chainsaw sound effects into it, but I think musically and recording wise, it's played a little bit different, maybe a little faster, maybe just a little more maybe meaner sounding, more gnarly. That's a thing that I've noticed about the version on the EP or the single on the single. It's just a totally different version in my opinion, and I think again I prefer that version over the album. But I do want to talk about, since we're on the topic of cover songs, there's another cover that never made the album, maybe for good reason, but I got a soft spot for it because it's actually the song that made me ever dare to actually check the guy's stuff to begin with. But Sodom covering Bryan Adams' The Kids Wanna Rock. Now, that is probably the most unusual thing you'll ever hear, at least a thrash metal band ever cover, is at least a Bryan Adams song. But the thing is, the thing is, the way Sodom takes that song almost makes it sound like if AC/DC and Motorhead got together and basically played. That's just the kind of feel, just has that sort of Motorhead / AC/DC style boogie groove and heaviness to it. Again, very almost at times giving a slight new wave or British heavy metal feel to it. It's interesting and I somewhat kind of dig it. And the thing is, it's that song that made me want to try and recheck out Bryan Adams to begin with, and that's where I've kind of made my stance on which favorite Bryan Adams album I like. That's Reckless, which is the album that the song The Kids Wanna Rock came off of, and that's still the only record I like from him. That's the only record. So there you go. So I gotta give my hat off, tip my hat off to Sodom for actually inspiring me to even check out a Bryan Adams album to begin with. So I tip my hat off to Sodom, even though it may have been very unnecessary. I'm gonna give the respect where it's due there. I'm gonna give credit where it's due. So there you go. So there you go. There is, of course, Better Off Dead from Sodom. Again, I don't think there's really a bad song. I don't think this is really the most boring Sodom album. Yes, it's following Agent Orange, which was definitely a classic record, and of course, it's being sandwiched in between, for sure, Agent Orange and Tapping the Vein, which are definitely two of some of Sodom's best albums, for sure. But this album, I don't think, is not the album that many people want to pan it out to be. I think, again, it's it's just a good, solid Sodom album that definitely sees the band really kind of branching out a little bit in some ways to kind of make a more acquired taste kind of album, to almost kind of get people to really test the waters for if they really might be interested in listening to Sodom to begin with. Again, it's the beginning of the 1990s. It was not going to be a good era to, of course, to a lot of the thrash metal bands due to the whole grunge and at times even rap and pop and so on. Everything was just, the musical climate was changing. And so it was going to be tougher on especially a lot of the classic metal bands and thrash metal bands and so on. It was going to be tougher on them because they weren't going to be the flavor of the month anymore. So it was like almost like a kill or be killed, like a kind of situation, like a fight or flight, basically, whether or not they should continue playing what they're playing or adapt, basically. And I think Sodom, in many ways, while I don't think they were the worst, I think Sodom, was the one German thrash metal band I think that really kind of kept their sound and really was more consistent throughout the 90s and throughout any era. I think they were the most consistent thrash metal band. Whatever chance they took, still, I don't think really hurt the band because they didn't go in any grunge direction. They didn't go into any rap direction, like again with either Anthrax or Slayer or anything industrial. Like again, same goes for like Crater. They didn't go in a lot of those kind of directions. Instead, whatever direction they took, which they took more of a hardcore punk direction, which of course again they were influenced a lot by punk bands too, besides Slayer, but I think they did a way where it actually worked. So they knew what worked and what didn't work. But I think Sodom was the most consistent band, and the thing is, that's why I think you gotta kind of have to give a lot of respect to Sodom. They did what they'd want to do, and this may have been the most commercial sounding album. But I think in many ways it did a good job of making it commercial sounding because of it actually it was still thrashy, it still had its edge, but it definitely wasn't nearly as raw or nearly as maybe just as biting sounding as like Agent Orange, nor wasn't as threatening sounding as like either their earlier material or Tapping the Vein. But it still had at least a good balance. I think it wasn't that bad of a record. It just, again, it's sandwiched in between two good records. But I don't think it's that bad of an album. So I think, again, for what they tried with this album, I think they did a pretty decent job of it. So there you go. There is Better Off Dead. Since, of course, again, it was released on October 5th, which was pretty much at this point a month ago. If you were there when this album first came out, let me know what were your thoughts when you first heard it. But if you have heard this album, what are your thoughts on this record to begin with? But if you haven't heard this album, I would not recommend checking out Better Off Dead first. Again, start off with like Persecution Mania and Agent Orange, and at times even Tapping the Vein or M16 and Code Red. You know, any of those albums. And even if you really are curious to know how they started off early on, I would say again, In the Sign of Evil and Obsessed by Cruelty, which is they're two of the most hardest to come by albums. I know they've been reissued, but they've also once again, because the reissues were so limited, well, they pretty much were easy to go out of print. So they're not very easy to stay in print. But if you ever really track down those early records, I think they're definitely a very good look into how they were, again, even though I got a soft spot for their earlier stuff too. But I think, again, they're for a lot of people who like more straight up, more thrash metal, again, stuff like, again, Agent Orange and Better Off Dead, I think is definitely not a bad album too. So, but again, it wouldn't be my first choice, but it's not a bad choice either. Again, if you dig stuff like, for sure, again, some just of the classic thrash metal stuff, I think Sodom is at least with Better Off Dead, is a good album. So there you go. There is, of course, Better Off Dead. This, of course, again, is right now, it is the end of episode number 91. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrash. I say I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone. And I hope all of you are looking forward to, of course, Genesis XIX from Sodom.